this second big challenge in his life, is that he turns to Ben-Hadad, king of Aram. And he goes and he takes all the gold and the silver that he placed in the temple, and he takes it out and he gives it to this man. And so he really takes his trust in the Lord that he had before, and he takes it and he returns and he places his reliance upon a man. And so what's the result? The result is Ben-Hadad agreed with King Asa, so they got this treaty going on now, and sent the commanders of his forces against the towns of Israel. They conquered Ijon, Dan, Abel-Maim, and all the store cities of Naphtali. When Baasha heard this, he stopped rebuilding Ramah and abandoned his work. Then King Asa brought all the men of Judah, and they carried away from Ramah the stones and timber Baasha had been using. With him he built up Giza and Mizpah. So the result of relying upon man is that he's successful. Right? I mean, in essence, he sees success. And this is a little iffy, right? Like he takes out the money from God, God's money. He takes what is God's, he gives it to a man, he replaces it in trust in man, and then he sees a positive result from it. Initially, he sees a positive result from it. But it's the grander scheme of things that what's going on that really is the real true result of what's going on. You see, initially he sees success, but in the grand scheme of things, Hananiah comes and he tells us what's really going on. In verse 7 it says, "At that time Hananiah the seer came to Asa, king of Judah, and said to him, because you relied on the king of Aram and not on the Lord your God, the army of the king of Aram has escaped from your hand. Were not the Cushites and Libyans a mighty army with great numbers of chariots and horsemen? Yet when you relied on the Lord, he delivered them into your hand. For the eyes of the Lord range throughout the earth to strengthen those whose hearts are fully committed to him. You have done a foolish thing, and from now on you will be at war." So the real result of placing his trust and his reliance upon man is now that he had a kingdom of peace. He had a kingdom where everything was great, where he could trust in the Lord, and he was making reforms and things were going well, and now he has thrown that all away because he trusted in man. And whereas he should have been able to defeat the king of Aram, now he's locked in a treaty with the king of Aram. He can no longer carry out God's will and God's call for the nation of Israel, for Judah to be the nation fully devoted to God. Instead, he enters into a treaty with man, and no longer does his reign have any peace in it. And Asa's reaction to the oracle could really change things, I think. That if he had had a repentant heart, that he could have really turned things around. That, God, I'm sorry, you know what, I should have trusted in you. But instead he throws Hananiah in jail, and he still turns his back on God even further. At the end of his life, he's inflicted with a disease in his feet. 3 years after this prophecy, he's inflicted a disease in his feet, and he trusts in the physicians to try and heal him. He doesn't trust in the Lord. It says that. He does not turn back to God. He still turns away. And so although he started good, he started in this great place, he ends really bad. He started trusting in the Lord, and he seems to have forgotten the way that the Lord delivered him previously, and instead he trusts in man. And as a result, the rest of his rule is really negative. And 2 years after he's inflicted with this disease in his feet, he dies. And it never says that he comes back to God. It's still kind of up in the air. We don't know. Did he turn back to God? Did he turn away from him? What happened to this guy? You know, Asa had seen the results of relying on God. He knew that God had power. He knew that God could deliver him. And yet, 20 years of peace seems to have thrown him towards apathy towards God. That things were going really good in his life. So he didn't need to trust in God. Wesley said this. He says, "We trust in God when we have nothing else to trust in, when need drives us to him. But when we have other things to lean on, we are apt to rely on our own understanding." That when things are going really good in our lives, we don't need to trust in God because things are great. But when things are terrible in our lives, man, let me trust in God. Fine, I'll trust in God right now, right? I'll trust in God now because I don't have anywhere else to turn. But God is calling us to trust and to rely upon him all the time. You see, all of us in this room, I think, we can probably think of a time when we relied upon our own strength and not God's. You see, we rely upon God for direction and for help, right? We do what is right, and we go to camp or whatever. We rededicate our lives to say, God, I'm going to follow your will. And my favorite is one of my friends, whenever she got home from high school camp, she'd get in front of the church. You know, I went home and I broke all my non-Christian CDs. I destroyed all the idols in my life. And then somehow in the next year she would recollect all those non-Christian CDs that she had broken before. She really didn't turn her heart fully to God. There was no real reliance upon the Lord. You see, we enjoy peace, and then everything is good, and then we forget about what God has done in our lives. We forget that what we have is really because of what He has given us. We don't rely upon God. And then crisis hits. Another crisis in our life hits, and then we can't handle it. Because we have turned our attentions towards man. We have turned our attentions over here. We're looking over here to see how man can help us. We're looking at ourselves to see how we can help us. We don't even turn to God. We don't even think to turn to God. Or maybe we're in this place and we've just never relied upon God. We've never actually given Him that reliance. We've never actually placed our full trust in God. And so I want to ask you today, where's your trust? Where's your reliance? Are you relying upon yourself? Are you relying upon others? Or are you relying upon God? You see, Esau was a man who started well, but he finished bad because he did not rely upon God. Will you choose to rely upon God today?